for me, suffering as a pro cyclist is not the moment that I was in pain when I'm going for a win or I'm doing the last peel pull for my teammate who I'm trying to set up for win. Like that, there's pain and there's intensity and there's some suffering, but that's in the spirit of gaining and victory and winning. The toughest moments and the worst for me were when I was at risk of losing something that I had worked so hard for and everyone around me had worked so hard for. And we had pulled out all the stops and gave everything. And then I'm looking at losing it. And one of those moments was 2016 tour. I'd just been named before the tour to the Olympic team, the 2016 Olympic team. And then in the first stage of the tour that year, I'm on the ground. There's a super high speed crash. Alberto Contador and myself both went down, a few others. But I was ripped to shreds. I had lost so much skin. I had bruised ribs. And this is day one of the tour. Then I'm also thinking in the back of my head, I cannot DNF this tour, Brent. I cannot DNF this tour because I can't lose this Olympic selection. This is so important to me, and I'm so excited for this. So I suffered my ass off for the next 10 days or 2 weeks like never before.
Brent Bookwalter is a Tour de France commentator for the NBC Peacock team. He spent 16 years as a pro cyclist and raced in the World Tour at the very highest level of the sport, including on the BMC squad that helped Cadel Evans win the 2011 Tour de France. Brent shares about his experiences before, during, and after his career as a pro cyclist, the path that led him to pursue a graduate degree in psychology, why he passed on the loud calling of the Holy Spirit of gravel, and how he landed that coveted tour analyst gig. Catch him on Peacock's coverage of the tour, and to learn more, go to BrentBookwalter.com and at Brent Bookwalter on Twitter. Welcome back to Choose the Hard Way. I'm Andrew Vance, and this is the podcast about how doing hard things is fun and build stronger humans. You are one of those strong humans if you are listening to this podcast. So please hit subscribe and rate this show 5 stars and leave a positive review wherever you listen. Sign up for the newsletter at choosethehardway.com, and you can suggest guests and send me your great ideas at HardwayPod on social and to choosethehardway@gmail.com. As always, find those links in the show notes.
I often had times where I was sort of looking around me, thinking, where did these guys come from, and how did they get here, and how are they able to just turn it all off? I mean, I was a consummate overthinker, and it was a strength. But it was also a weakness at times that I, got caught up in my old head and overthink and overprocessed and dwelled and remunerated and just couldn't let go or couldn't stop thinking. And it wasn't really until later in my career that I sort of got a better awareness of that and realized that, and then also, got some support and figured out how to kind of work through that and really, see that as a strength and anchor into it. But it's still something I'm challenged with in terms of the overthinking and overprocessing. I do it a lot. I think the people I email see it right away. They're probably, half the time it's like, I can't reply to this guy because it's just, I just mind dump on them, and it's a lot. But yeah, like I said, we all have our things. That's my thing, for better or for worse, and another thing that I'm still working through.
And I know I want to get into this because I know you're going to start a PhD program, correct? You're going to be studying
a master's program
some type of,
to start. Okay. Yeah, first things first.
Program. I like it. I love the small steps. I have this feeling you're going to end up probably getting a PhD, maybe a postdoc. You just seem like a bit of an overachiever, Brent. But what are you going to be studying?
I'm going to be entering a sport and performance psychology program.
Okay. And I will tell you, I was just interviewing Mitch Docker yesterday, and he was sharing a bit with me about his experience with eventually working with a sports psychologist, how that worked for him, where it took him in his career, and how it benefited him. You just talked a bit about what you experienced during your World Tour career. What was your experience like learning to harness the power of what was going on inside your brain within that pro racing context? And then I would love to talk about how that applies, to life beyond the Peloton, to use Mitch's, podcast title, perhaps.
Yeah, for sure. That was a evolution and a process. I think as a young rider, like many young, aspiring, dream big riders, it was all about just pushing hard and going all the time, and nothing can stop me, and I could never be knocked down. And that I was fortunate that went along for a while. I was fortunate to keep improving, and I never got too far ahead of myself in terms of what the end point was or where I could go, but just was focused and consumed about the next step, and was able to really tick along those steps quite well when I was a young aspiring bike rider. But then eventually, like everyone, I started hitting some roadblocks, bumping my head against some walls, and then even being stopped in my tracks entirely. And yeah, it took me a while to figure out, but that was the moment I realized I was going to need a little extra support than just youthful enthusiasm and the natural talent that I had and the hard work, which, to a large extent, the hard work is almost kind of the easy thing. Like the training and the enthusiasm and the passion for it, that's kind of the easy part. And then the hard part is working through the challenging moments and the setbacks, and really digging deep and figuring out what other resources lie within myself and how I can tap the network and, inner circle around me to support and contribute to that as well.
I've interviewed Allison Jackson a couple of times in the past few months. I think like every human in the world who's doing something related to professional cycling and is lucky enough to have access to the EF team. So I'm grateful I've been able to do that. One of the things I found to be really interesting about Allison in that interview is her mentality is for every race she enters, she just assumes like, I'm going to win this race. Like, of course I'm going to win this race. And I've met some pro athletes and people in business and other contexts who definitely have that mentality. And then I've met other people who are not like that, who have self-doubt, who have anxiety, and yet they show up and are still able to perform and win. Where do you fall on that continuum?
I'd say more of the latter. I think I was, like I said, thoughtful and critically thinking almost to a fault or detriment of myself at times. And I sort of put my confidence and my trust sort of came from the process. And it came from the team I was involved with and being buoyed by those around me, more than just an outright, a non-negotiable confidence that I was always going to win. Like I would look at my competitors and think they're delusional, but it's working. Like they're delusionally confident, and this is a strength. Like, that's not naturally me. That's not my default. But I also recognize that was an asset, and it's a virtuous trait as a competitor sometimes. So I had to figure out how to get myself into that moment in that place mentally as well. I admire those people that can do it. It's like you said, I think it's quite personal, but it's definitely advantageous to be able to be in that space.
And you mentioned you had some bumps in the road along the way and some full stops that made you really seek outside help and work to reframe how you were approaching how you thought about competition and the sport. And I'm sure similar things have probably happened within the context of life. But in the world tour context, could you share what were some of those moments? Is there one that jumps out at you?
Oh, yeah, there's a lot. I think when I reflect on my career, it's defined by the setbacks and the trials and tribulations as much as the glories and successes. I think the most influential one was before I even really got there. When I was 23, I had just graduated from my undergrad in college, had just signed my first contract where I was getting paid a little bit and was going to do it finally full time. And about 3 months into that season, I had a pretty severe compound leg fracture when racing with the national team over in Belgium. And it was to the point where the day of the accident, they called my mom when I was in the hospital, and they said they didn't know if they were going to be able to save my leg. And so it was that severe. And that setback was, right when I was getting going. It was like I'd worked and really strived and gotten to that point, and I was ready to go. Finally, it was like, let me loose, let me do this bike race thing full time. And then, I was not walking. Thankful to just have my leg. I'd graduated from college, had split with my college girlfriend at the time, moved back in with my mom, spent the whole summer on her couch, multiple surgeries, didn't know if I was going to have a contract, didn't even know if I could ride. So that was sort of the first big reset. And then, there were a few more pivotal ones, I think, during my career. I think, obviously the injuries. I've got other metal and, an X-ray and MRI sheet that is multiple pages long. But really sort of there were like these transitions during my career when I had to accept. One of the big ones was when I was sort of forced to realize that it wasn't enough to just be a teammate. That was kind of what I hung my hat on early in my career. And that was largely defined by, supporting Cadel Evans to the Tour de France victory in 2011. But as I was developing and the team was also developing, I was fortunate enough to be with the BMC racing team that, we had a quite similar, growth track together. Pretty quickly after that, it was like, it's not good enough anymore to just be a teammate. And I was like, well, wait a minute, that's all you ever told me. And that's all I ever wanted to be. How do I do that? So that was a big revamp and transition as well.
And how did you make that transition?
Yeah, so that transition was, speaking of sport and performance psychology, that was the first time that I sought someone out and began working with a mental coach on the psychological aspects of my performance, and developed a greater understanding for that. And really went to work much like I did as I was going through college, and racing bikes and trying to improve. I went through it methodically and strategically, and I looked at the pieces of my performance that I could control. And that was one of them, definitely devoting some time and energy in psychological work. But then really that winter, I just got back to my program, my team. That was also a moment when I first, I guess, realized the importance that, I have the team in the sense of the BMC racing team that I'm on, and I'm very proud to be part of that team, and that team has resources for me, but I need my own team as well. And within that team, I need a cheerleader and a therapist and an advocate and a technical leader. And, I need all these roles to be filled. And I really went about sort of building my team and, focusing on the things that were in my control. I didn't go to training camp that year. I convinced the team to let me stay home, where I knew I didn't have to do the flight overseas. And my coach, Todd Harriet at the time, he came and stayed with me for a week plus, and just got down to business and did my own thing and resculpted my mind and body. And then I went to my first race the following year, and I won my first stage of my first race at the Tour of Qatar, a race that I vowed I would never even go back to or be able to finish. So that was a hugely pivotal moment in time.
And if you think about how you felt and the way you approached racing and training before you made this commitment to doing it a different way, and how it felt afterwards, what was the difference?
I felt empowered. I think I felt I felt empowered and mature. I felt like I just had new tools, new mechanisms, which then, allowed me to discover new capabilities. So I think I went through, part of this process initially was when I initially realized that I was going to have to also be a performer and a result getter in addition to being a teammate, I was frustrated and I felt kind of bitter and angry. But I had worked through that, and I had it was another layer of development that I think so many, pro athletes or whatever, whenever we pursue something at a high level, when I was forced to change, initially there was resistance, and there was almost there was this process of transition that had to take place, that I also had to let go of some of that. And that carried forward, through the rest of my career, because obviously that was not the only time that, I had feedbacks that was such that I was, frustrated and angry and bitter and stuff that I had to work through. So it really equipped me to then go forward to that next phase of my career, more capable and more adept at, persevering and adapting.
We see athletes all the time, and I think particularly within the context of the World Tour and pro cycling, that perhaps have that physiological gift. They have just crazy watts per kilogram. They appear to have the engine, And we see them excelling in support roles, perhaps as climbers in the high mountains or in other contexts. I think we also see this with lead out men and lead out women as well. And then if they are given that opportunity or they're forced into that leadership role, things really change, right? And can you just say more about what happens when those expectations change from, hey, someone is really gifted, they're helping someone else win, to now, like you're the CEO or you're the leader of this team and it's time for you to deliver?
Yeah, that's a big change. And I don't think, I wouldn't say, it'd be nice to say everyone's capable of that and everyone's suited for it, but I don't think everyone is. And I think a lot of that goes, one of the important parts and processes of this is looking at value. What is really important to us? Like in that moment, what was important to me? Why am I doing this? What do I want out of this? And making sure that also aligns with it. Otherwise, it's like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. So I think it's it's largely a question of value and purpose. There has to be purpose there. You have to feel like, for me, I had to feel like I was part of something bigger than just someone telling me I needed to win and prove something to them. It had to not just be about them. It had to be about intrinsically what was important to me, what I valued, where I was driving purpose from. And I think that's where the formal and the psychological training can really come in. I think, as cyclists, we have coaches for everything. We have coaches for, our training, for our nutrition, for what bikes we're riding, for how we sleep, you name it, it's coached. And it's often a void and a hole to not be supported in the higher psychological level as well.
And I know the Tour de France is on my mind. I'm sure it's on your mind as well. Something we've been talking a lot about on Beyond the Peloton, the pro cycling podcast that I co-host, really for the past year, is what's going to happen when Jonas Vingegaard is back at the Tour now that he's won the Tour. And obviously everyone is thinking about this question, but for me, having spent time with the world's top performers, not just within the context of pro cycling, but in, music, acting, business, as a journalist, and my career as an executive, something that I've noticed is that, again, like even when people have this capability, and even if they win one time, there's something very different once all eyes are on you. And it's not just that people expect you to win, but you have fame. Fame brings with it a very different pressure than being an underdog, as Jonas was last year, going from fishmonger to Tour de France winner. And, he seems like a very nice human being. I don't know him personally. He's incredibly talented. And I also, just from the outside, my sense is I don't feel like this person is built to be famous. And I'm curious to see what happens in this Tour now that he has the weight of fame, which is totally different than anything else. How do you think about that?
Yeah, I think you're 100% spot on. For me, the most exciting thing as we look to this Tour de France, obviously, is that matchup for the two favorites, Pogačar, Vingegaard, and really like their stories of where they came from and where they're going, and really that psychological development of, like you just said, how does the newly minted champion resurface as someone who's trying to repeat? And then you have Pogačar, who has done two in a row, but is coming from a completely different point of view and being defeated last year, but then dealing with the recent injuries from Liège-Bastogne-Liège this spring and being largely untested since then. So yeah, that really is for me, that's the key part of the storyline. And one of the privileges of having the role as an analyst with NBC, we had a chance to talk to some of the team directors, many of the team directors, and when we talked to Vingegaard's team director, I was trying to prod and poke and dig some of that out of them, and ask, how has he changed as a leader? How has he evolved? How has he been handling the pressure? And obviously, this is game time, the week before the Tour de France. Those directors aren't giving away anything, and even if they could, I can't tell you now here, but. The takeaway and the little bit that I've got from that, and also observing him and watching him through the spring, we've seen him have a really strong season. And And I think for him, he's going to handle it better than some of his other competitors would in that same situation. Like you said, I think he's very humble. I think his value and purpose, from what I can tell, that led him to the success last year hasn't changed, and that's not always the case. And that even echoed last year. I was there doing some commentary and analysis work at the tour on site. So I was in the mix zone, before the race, after the race, and we're talking to these guys, when they're just getting on the bike or when they're just getting off. And he was just extremely level the entire time and very calm, very thought out, which for me is an indication that, the reaction to everything that's coming at him, he has a good handle on it. So I think, from my very external assessment and observation, I think that's probably, continued through the off season and that, and the season up to now. And that, but again, that is, that's a key part of, I think, becoming a champion and then staying in that position and, solidifying himself as a, more than just a winner, but, a champion of a generation.
Well, Brent, let's talk a little bit about how you ended up in this position where you're going to be doing this gig for NBC. It's a gig that a lot of people would like to have, and you're doing it. So how did you go from world tour to your transition period during the past 2 years to now landing this role? And how does it fit into kind of the overall mix of what you have in mind for yourself going into the future?
Yeah, good question. The transition it's been challenging. It's been very challenging to step away from pro bike racing and figure out what I'm doing next, and get back to some of, like I said, my deeper values and purpose. When I retired and made that methodical decision to retire, I didn't know what was next. I knew I wanted to support my wife through the completion of her PhD. I wanted to be a more present father for our son, who's now 3 years old. And I wanted to give myself a chance to see life as an adult from a lens other than a pro bike racer, which I had never done. That said, I still recognize that I still love the sport. I especially love riding my bike. And I knew I didn't want to be in a team car, 200 or 250 days a year. As much as that said, I do really miss the team aspect of the racing. But I knew I wasn't going to that right away. So I was really interested in pursuing and exploring opportunities that would give me the chance to keep a foot in the cycling world, keep my eye in there, my mind on it, allow me to convey and provide the expertise and experience that I gathered over, almost 2 decades. And I think the commentating, struck me as a way that I could do that. I could harness some of that competitive energy, get myself in a new team of individuals, and also gain a new appreciation and perspective on what the sport is and what it's like. And I had the chance last year to be part of the Flow Bikes team on site at the tour. We had a really small squad. It was just 3 of us, and we were covering a lot. We were at the starts, we were at the finishes. Sometimes we were doing segments during the race. But I got to say, being at the race, I was a little reserved going into it. I was like, got to go back for a month on the road. This is just like being a racer. I'm going to be living out of a suitcase. I don't even get to ride as much now, or maybe at all. But man, being at the tour and being part of a new team covering the tour and harnessing that purpose, it was impactful, not just for what I was doing at the moment and the passion and inspiration I was finding covering it, but also on the perspective that it brought on what I did in my career. It was a different perspective. I know what it's like to be elbow to elbow and wall to wall with those guys, fighting each other for position and fighting each other for victories. But to see them coming at me and doing it head on, I had goosebumps. It was super powerful. I found myself looking at these guys with a new appreciation for even what I did. I thought, holy shit, like I did this? Oh man, like this is nuts. I can't believe I did this. So so yeah, when I did that, I had the chance to cover with flow bikes. I realized like, yeah, this is cool. I'd like to do more of this. And at the time, I had no idea if there would be any turnover at NBC. But obviously, growing up, that was how I followed the tour. It was the team at NBC and the U.S. broadcasters that were bringing me that coverage and really opened my eyes and opened my heart to dream big on the bike. So that was always kind of the sort of a lofty sort of dream, was to think, oh, if I'm going to do any sort of commentary or analysis, like this would be the team that I'd love to do it with. And then it just so happened that there was going to be some movement within their team. And earlier, it was actually back this winter, kind of word was getting out that there was an open seat. And, through my network, I figured out that there was that open seat and tried to put my name in the hat. But it was a pretty stout list of other riders and competitors and analysis that were throwing their hat in, and many of whom I know and are my peers. But I tried to approach it kind of philosophically in that if my style and what I can bring and my expertise and experience is what's going to be a good fit, then I'll have a chance to get in there. And if it's not, it's just like racing the tour. You don't want to pull the wool over anyone's eyes, because the last thing you want as a competitor is to be at the tour and not be ready and capable. And I'd say the same for this analysis gig with NBC. It's like, if I don't have what they need, I don't want to be there, because it's a big responsibility to bring that coverage forward. So yeah, so far so good. We haven't even started yet, but it's been fun getting synced up with that team and learning the inner workings. It's a big production. There's a lot of people involved, and I'm learning a lot already.
Brent, I don't know how much you could say about the process. I am really curious, what was the tryout process like? And then what kind of training have you done to prepare to go do this? Because you don't just show up camera ready. I think everybody in the world, or many people, they might watch a podcast, they might watch something on a stream, a bike race. I mean, I can tell you, for me, the transition from doing probably more than 1,000 interviews for print or digital journalism and then working to become a podcaster was pretty brutal for me. It's been, I feel like I've grown a lot, but it's very, very different stylistically than how I would approach sitting down and doing an interview with someone that I'm then going to write about. They're totally different things. So how have you approached it?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, at times I'm squirming. I would be, in a lot of ways, I'd be more comfortable and confident just being on my bike, for 30 hours a week, preparing like I was going to go ride the tour, because that's what I know and that's what I've always done. So in a lot of ways, just like you said, it's another reminder that change is tough and it's challenging. And I'm not someone who intrinsically is able to quickly adapt and change. Like, it takes me a little bit to psych myself up and wrap my head around it. So it's been a process to do that with the NBC gig, and the selection process and the interview process was sort of just that. It was some phone calls, some sort of like virtual sort of like test remote shows, some back and forth, some feedback, and then ultimately a decision that I was in. And then since then, it's been a bit of education on protocol and philosophy and values of that organization and that network, because they have their own brand, their own style that is different than the other ones out there. So it's some awareness and education on what that is. And then a little bit of practice, but to be honest, not as much. I think as an athlete, I gained so much confidence from, doing the reps in training and doing even more sometimes in training. You'd overcompensate. If you do more than training, when you get to the race, you can at least do what's in the race. And that has not been the case for this. We haven't done any shows yet. Sam Bewley, my old teammate, who I'm going to be sitting next to and talking next to the entire month, we've been on the phone a little more. We had one sort of super informal, impromptu digital show that we talked about the Unchained docuseries on Netflix. But that was really just like off the cuff. It was just like, watch Unchained, talk about it, go. So both of us, luckily Sam's he's a great talker, and he's quite the podcast host himself. So he was able to sort of take the lead there and lead us through. But yeah, not a lot of prep. I was thinking this morning as I was driving my son to school, as I get ready to leave for this adventure and this trip, it's much like going off to a race. And at the end of the day, I feel like I'm tapping into and harnessing my performance mindset, like I was in racing. And it's interesting to reactivate that, but it's nice to know that I've done it and it is a new environment. But I'm going to, put on my game face and think critically, and also be relaxed and have fun. They keep telling us, be yourself, be relaxed, and you and Sam are having a conversation about your favorite sport, and that's what people want to hear. So hopefully that's enough.
Have you studied the styles of any commentators from pro cycling or other sports that you're look to as role models?
A little. I think mostly. I've watched and studied just some of Christian's stuff because that's sort of the seat that Sam and I are stepping into, and he's done it now. I think for 8 or this might be his 9th year, and his style was developed for NBC. He started in there as a full newbie, and now he's had a successful run doing it. So I've been somewhat careful to not. I want to leave myself open to develop my own style. And I think that's part of the reason that the network has brought on a completely new team in Sam and I is that it really is a chance for a fresh start and for us to, create our own vibe and style. And we'll hopefully do that, get bantering back and forth and find our own flow and find how we fit together.
What expectations, if any, do you have for this period of time when you're going to be doing commentary? I mean, are you going for the green jersey, the yellow jersey? Like, what do you want to do as a commentator?
I think, when I mentioned the challenge of the transition from racing and how just frankly difficult it's been, I keep coming back to the need to sort of allow myself to explore and not get fixated on outcome, and really take it as it comes. So I'm trying to approach the commentating and the analyst stuff in the same way. I think there's a level of excellence that I want to pursue in everything that I do. I want to be great at it, and I want to do it with integrity, and I want the people that I'm accountable to be happy, and I want the people that I'm close to be proud. But that said, I'm trying not to, get too far ahead of myself and not think about, 1 or 5 years down the track or even 6 months down the track, and just view this, at the end of the day, this is a unique experience and one that I know I'm going to grow through and learn a lot from, and hopefully have some fun along the way. So trying to stay in that place for now.
You mentioned just team a number of times and what you got from being part of a high functioning, high performance team. And I'm curious, as you made this transition from being a world-class athlete into normal world, civilian world, whatever we want to call it, what has it been like? Because it's not always the case in other operational environments that people want to be, not everyone wants to be world-class at what they do. Hopefully you and the people listening are lucky enough to be in contexts where they are surrounded by people who have extremely high standards for themselves, extremely high ambitions, and want to bring their personal best to everything that they do. And sadly, that's often it's just not the case on every team that you find yourself on in life. So what has it been like to go from that high performance, we're going to go win the Tour de France context, into just like the rest of life?
That process has been slow and sobering and destabilizing. I think I had so much joy and pleasure, but also confidence and fulfillment from operating within those teams and that demographic that you just described. That's, you say that, I'm like, those are my people. Like, I want to get in there with them. But yeah, I've had to sort of take a step back, because I had to realize, that this was, my cycling career was the culmination of everything I was working for in that realm, from the time I was a kid. So, it taught me a lot, and it allowed me to grow and achieve and excel in that team environment. But it was in an environment and with a demographic that it took a long time to get there, and it was a long process. So yeah, I've sort of had to accept that I'm not just going to jump out from the sport and jump right back into that same level of execution and purpose in everything I do. I'm trying to find just pieces of it and take it when I can. But also really that's a lot of the framework of where I want to go in the future. That's one of the reasons I'm enrolling in the master's program in the sport and performance psychology world, because I think myself, with my athletic experience and some bolstered academic credentials in that role, I think and I'm hopeful that'll provide some avenues to go back into those teams and in that world of performers and excellence and high operation.
I'm catching you at this moment when you're on another peak, like you've achieved and you're about to execute at another really high level. And, it's something like everybody would like to go do this job if they had the chance and they love the sport. You're getting to do it. And as you mentioned, there have been some tough moments between leaving pro cycling and right now, and life being the way it is. I'm sure there are more ahead. Could you talk more specifically about during this transition, what has been tough and what have you grappled with from an identity perspective, or even getting to some kind of certainty about, I'm going to go into this master's in psychology program. I'm interested in doing commentating, whatever the case may be. What were some of the points of confusion where you didn't necessarily have that North Star?
Oh, all of them. It's confusion everywhere. There's been a lot of identity, shifting and questioning. I think the end of my pro racing career also coincided with a big transition in life of becoming a parent. Our son was born in February of 2020. So we had this, I had this moment, 2020, 2021, we don't have to say it, for everyone, was a transitional, uncertain time. And my story and path there was, sort of, we had the pandemic thing. I became a father. And then I was also already working through, I'm not going to do this pro bike racing thing that much longer. And then to complicate it further, we had this other impending transition of my wife, Jamie, had been working on her PhD over in Spain and Barcelona for a long time. We knew that was going to be wrapping up pretty soon. And then we were anticipating a move back to the USA. So for me, it's like become a father, conclude professional cycling career, support my wife as she begins her career, and then move back to the USA all at once. Not all on the same day, but this is all happening. It's still playing out. We've only been back in the US now for a few months, and she's only been working at her new job for a few months. So for me, I guess just figuring out, how I fit into that. Where's my purpose? Where's my accountability in terms of how I'm spending my time? As a pro cyclist, that was so easy. I just knew every day I'm waking up and I'm prioritizing staying in shape, riding, making everything as efficient and smooth and performance-based as possible. And now initially the pull is to do the same thing, but it's not to achieve or produce the same result or outcome. So I've had to really, reflect and think, explore. And I think I can sort of be philosophical and say that I think it's for the better. And, I see some of my peers, they jump right out of the sport, they go into the next thing. And I've looked at them through this process going, oh man, I wish I was just full gas, 100% all into something. But then when I reflect back on the prior 18 months, I'm also realizing now, like, I have evolved and I have progressed and I'm learning new things about myself and the direction I want to go, and my role with my family and my role as a spouse and as a father, and as a professional as well. So it's like I'm sort of like in the darkness exploring all these caves, but in these dark, scary caves, I'm like finding some nuggets of wisdom and some purpose and some value. And I think it is it is productive and it's advancing me, but it's slow. It's definitely a process, and it's really a lesson in patience and, some self-compassion and taking it as it comes. But yeah, more than anything, going back to what was one of the most challenging things is it's really that accountability to time and the purpose of the day.
Have you been able to embrace the uncertainty that you've encountered as you've gone through the process of figuring out, okay, what is the next thing for me? What do I want to give 100% commitment to? Or was it extremely anxiety provoking? Because, part of change is it's going to be deeply uncomfortable, but even if you accept that on its face, the actual experience of it can be pretty terrifying and anxiety provoking. So what was it like for you?
Yeah. Full disclosure, transparency. It is terrifying. I think it's you mentioned I'm sort of like at another little peak. I'm about to head off to this exciting thing that I've worked towards and I'm really excited to do. So it's easy to sit here in this moment now and say like, oh yeah, the uncertainty is inspiring and opens up doors for opportunity. But yeah, at the end of the day, there's been many moments where I felt just what you described. A lot of anxiety, a lot of uncertainty. As a competitor and a performer, as an athlete, I gained so much pleasure, but also joy and confidence from executing, like really grabbing those controllables, like I said, and really, grabbing onto them, sinking my teeth into them, digging in and willing myself through them, smashing on the pedals and, turning over every stone and dotting every I and crossing every T. And it's unsettling to not know what all those are, and to also not have this outlet to not have this physical outlet to just brunt force will my way through something. I often viewed training and racing as like this, it's like this sculpture, and there's some art behind, there's some science behind the engineering of the sculpture, and there's some art. And, sometimes you're in there with like your protractor and you're measuring things precise. Sometimes I'm like chiseling and brushing. And then sometimes I'm just taking a hammer and smashing away. And it's been challenging to not be able to grab a hold of that hammer and smash through productively towards anything. But it's given me a new perspective for the fine strokes and, the engineering and the other parts of it as well.
Yeah, it's interesting as for me personally, as somebody who's ridden bikes with gears for 30, 35-ish years now, I've never been that great at it. Something I really enjoy about it, and what I've realized about the kind of the spot it has in my life at the moment, the role it's played over time, is that there are very few things in life where the effort you put in, if you follow a specific plan, results in a specific predictable outcome.
Beautiful.
And so the way I think about it now, and like you, I'm a father, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm working on a startup, I've got the podcast, I do a number of other things. And for me, the moment in the day, like last night, actually, I took a break from work at 9 p.m. and I went and got on Zwift, and it's late June. I live in Maine. It's only nice. It's really, you can only ride outside for 3 to 4 months a year here. And I really look forward to it. I was like, I can't believe I'm going to get on, I'm going to get on Zwift at 9 p.m. right now. And I also thought, man, it's probably going to be hard to go to sleep. But I also know training is based on continuity. And I was like, if I don't do this today, there's no clawing this back in the future. So whatever, I'm going to get on the trainer and I know I'm going to feel better. And I did. But to me, that's actually the easiest part of my day, because I know that that's going to do something good for me. I'm going to feel emotionally better. It's going to improve my health. I mean, also you can, as we know, you can way over index and it can become extremely unhealthy.
Yes.
So that's kind of, I think that that's an interesting thing about once it's become a totally automatic part of your life, the role that the bike can play in your life. And I don't know about you, but for me personally, in good times or bad, working with my therapist, Dr. J, shout out Dr. J, is just a critical part of just like my overall well-being and health. I feel very privileged that I have the capacity to be able to work with a great therapist. As you've gone through this transition, whether it's a therapist or people around you in your network, who are the people that you've turned to so that you continue to have some kind of orientation as you've navigated this uncertainty?
Yeah, it takes a village. I think, as you described, I'm still using the bike heavily, still medicating like that. That's a whole thing in itself. There's been this, it's kind of a detox that's had to take place in terms of the training load, but it's still the best show in town in terms of physical, mental, social, spiritual therapy. So I'm still relying very, very heavily on that. And I think, the therapist I work with, actually, she's has a good experience working with a lot of other Olympic level athletes. And she's been supportive in helping me sort of understand that is a healthy way to cope. It's like, we're talking about bike riding, like, the Surgeon General and all the health science we have is like, riding a bike, like you said, you can over-index, but like, this is good for you. This is good for you. This is good for your life. It's good for your relationships. So those are sort of at odds with each other. It's like, I'm trying to evolve and move on and not need, 30 hours of intense training in my life. But at the end of the day, it's like, the bike it's healthy and it's a tool for enjoyment and physical health and mental health and all of those things. So, going back to the therapist role, that's definitely a role that I have, and I'm working with and working through on that level. Obviously, my inner circle, my family, my wife Jamie. I think when I was mulling over the decision and timing to retire, I developed and sort of implemented, a semi-formalized team to help me through that decision and transition and how I was going to deliver this news and accept this news myself. So I've continued to like check in and stay in touch with some of, those people, that crew, that inner team of mine who are friends and advisors. And then really peers. Like, it's comforting to talk to some of my other peers, retired pro cyclists, also, ex-military, others who have lived lives that were so focused and pursued in a sort of single-minded, obsessive level, and then had to transition out. I think relatability is important, in that we know we're not alone. There's other people doing it as well.
And I know that in your writing that I've read related to your transition, and as you've mentioned on this podcast, part of what you wanted to achieve during this period of time is greater presence with your partner, with your family. I don't know about you, but I've found that during moments in life when you actually do have this space to potentially cultivate greater presence, that also typically is when you have the highest levels of uncertainty, because you're figuring out like, okay, what's the next thing I'm going to do? Or as you said, when you're doing your own thing, you're building your own thing, you're putting together your own program, you don't have somebody dumping something into Training Peaks telling you, hey, Brent, if you want to be a commentator on NBC, here's what you do for the next 2 years. There's really no visible horizon. So what's your experience been like with actually trying to be present, and have you achieved it? How are you doing, Brent?
It's tough. Yeah, it is. In a lot of ways, I've experienced those two dynamics being at odds with each other. It's like, I think we need some time and space to step back, to be more present, and that allows a processing and development of what comes next. But as a naturally someone whose tendency to push and go forward, and if I'm not going forward, I feel like I'm going back. That also can quickly obliterate this joy and really privilege to like have some space and have some presence. So it is a constant work, and something that I keep coming back to. And, I frequently try to snap forward and like, reflect as if I'm looking back on this moment, 1, 3, or 5 years from now. I don't want to look back at these moments and think, gosh, I had this very privileged role and opportunity to, pick my son up from school more and be around more and see sort of also where the wind take me and the world took me. But I spent the whole time just like, neurotically fighting and chomping down on what I wanted to have or didn't have. So it doesn't come easy. It's something that I have to like continuously try to acknowledge and recommit to every day. And I'm sure those people that are close around me, some would say like, you're not doing a very good job at this. Or some days I don't feel like I am, but it's a process and something that I'm still aware is it's not an overnight thing.
You have, of course, dabbled a bit in gravel racing. You have not gone the route of a lot of people who've left the World Tour and just boomerang back into becoming a professional gravel racer, which that's also cool. Why was that not for you?
Yeah, good question. I still I love riding my bike. Like I did not stop racing because I lost the love for bike riding. I love the bike as much as ever. And I knew when I stopped racing professionally that I wanted to redefine what the bike meant to me. And I'm also competitive and I want to test myself. I like to push myself. Like, as you say in your podcast, like it's fun and educational, and explorative to do hard things. And I like doing hard things. And that's where I feel most alive. I often feel most alive on the bike, pushing myself, interacting and interfacing with my environment. So it's still a huge part of who I am. That said, I've gone back and forth. Like I'll be honest, there's been times the past year and a half where I'm like, man, I should have went all into this privateer thing. Like this looks freaking fun. These guys are having a blast. They're traveling around. They're still racing. But I also know that for me, that would also bring things that I purposefully wanted to step away from and move away from when I stepped away from racing. And I also know, personally that I would have a hard time splitting that balance of like prioritizing all those things that I wanted to do and have committed to when I stopped racing, while also being committed to another form of accountable bike racing. So yeah, it's a little bit complicated, and I've dabbled in it, and that's a constant evolution and process. I've sort of gravitated towards events and challenges that were further away from road racing, because the further away I am from road racing, the more I can like let go, or like the more quickly I can let go. And I say the more I can let go or the more quickly, because I'm still not letting go. I'm still like, I start one of these events and I'm like chomped down, like competitor again. I'm going to hang on as long as I can, and I'm going to show them and show me and this and that. But eventually, I think every event I've done, I have gotten to a point where I do kind of like, this is why I'm here. Let's stay honest to this. This is what I'm getting out of this. And that's been educational and figuring out, that redefinition of the bike and how it fits in. And at the same time, it's still fun. It's fun to be in that community and push myself, and I feel alive there.
Yeah. And you and I both know that nothing is cool. Nothing is as cool as it looks on its surface.
For sure.
Right. I mean, I had Alexei Vermeulen on the show, and part of what I like about Alexei and his creative partner Avery, part of what I like about the content they put out, it shows Alexei at 11 p.m. the night before a major gravel race changing his chain ring, or putting a new chain on, like trying to get that tire insert in the tire, all of which, those are things that I've done as an amateur, racer, going out and doing things that I had always read, like, if you're going to do this, definitely don't do this
the night before.
Don't do it the night before the race. And then talking to him, he's like, oh yeah, well, yeah, I don't have time. And like, that's what I had to do. And for me personally, I don't sleep well ever the night before a big competition, which is probably why I'm just generally not that great at them. But, Alexei shared with me, he's like, yeah, I get terrible sleep. I'll sleep like 3 hours and then I get up and do it. And sometimes I win. It's like, wow, that's pretty amazing. Stars, they're just like us. But yeah, there's all the glitters is not gold. And then also, it's a lot of fun too, right?
For sure. Yeah, no, I had that. It's funny you say that. Last year when I went to Unbound as one of my, first events after pro cycling retirement, I saw Alexi the day before the race. I was dipping into the grocery store to, get some stuff to eat. And I see him and he is like, blazing by me with a shopping cart, like locked on, like on a mission. And I'm like, whoa, hey man, we always talk about like, we'll see each other and catch up at these races, everyone. And the fact is that it's just so busy. But yeah, for those guys, for him, he's like, oh, can't talk now. I got this appearance and this interview and this meet and greet. And then I got to get my bike ready. And so, yeah, it's good. It's good. Good check-in for me to see that. And like, all right, he's doing something different here than I am. And yeah, I think he's been successful and he's getting out of it what he wants. And he's created a value and takes joy in it. But yeah, it's been fun to go to some of those events and see that and have some awareness of what's going on and how I fit in, and realizing there still is a way for me to fit in as a bike rider, even if I'm not doing it to that level.
Brent, you're much more than what you did in the World Tour, and you have big things ahead of you. But I have to ask, what was your very toughest moment in the World Tour when it was the absolute most brutal?
Oh,
probably hard to pick just one.
It is hard to pick. Well, I was thinking about this as I'm reflecting on the tour, and I'm talking about it so much. I've been especially reflecting on tour memories. I think one of the for me, suffering as a pro cyclist is not the moments that I was in pain when I'm going for a win or I'm doing the last peel pull for my teammate who I'm trying to set up for win. Like that, there's pain and there's intensity and there's some suffering, but that's in the spirit of gaining and victory and winning. The toughest moments and the worst for me were when I was at risk of losing something that I had worked so hard for, and everyone around me had worked so hard for, and we had pulled out all the stops and gave everything, and then I'm risking, I'm looking at losing it. And one of those moments was the 2016 tour. I had just been named before the tour to the Olympic team, the 2016 Olympic team, and that was something that was a culmination of a career's work as well. I wasn't in the selection for 2012. Like in hindsight, especially, I was looking at it thinking like, that could have been me. I could have been in. Like, this is my shot. The next cycle, I got to make this happen. And I put a lot of physical, emotional, strategic effort into giving myself the best shot to being selected for the Olympics in 2016, and it happened. I was named to the team. There was only two of us. It was myself and Taylor Finney. And it was right ahead of the tour. And part of my selection petition and argument was that with the course we had in Rio, and the big favorites were talking about this too, is what is the best preparation for the Olympics? And it was being argued more and more and strategized that you probably need the tour for a climbing heavy course like in Rio. You probably need a big load like the Tour de France to really be ready. So the Tour de France selection was then kind of part of my Olympic bid. So there were these two selections going on, and it was extremely intense and exhaustive. And I was so proud to have made both of them. And then in the first stage of the tour that year, I'm on the ground. We're riding like second or third team, and there's a super high speed crash. Alberto Contador and myself both went down, a few others, but I was ripped to shreds. I had lost so much skin. I had bruised ribs. Thankfully didn't hit my head, but had some questionable joint stuff. And this is day one of the tour. So I'm in, peak physical condition. I had just achieved this dream to be selected to the Olympic team. And now I'm like thinking like, oh my God, like it could all go away now. I might have to leave the tour. If I leave the tour, does that mean my Olympic selection goes away? So that was a lot of suffering for a long time. And I was involved with this BMC racing team, which was also very capable and stacked. A few days later, Greg Van Avermaet got the yellow jersey, which was a organizational moment, defining highlight moment for the team. So it wasn't like I can't just take the days off either. It was like I gotta be there for the team. But then I'm also thinking in the back of my head, I cannot DNF this tour, Brent. I cannot DNF this tour because I can't lose this Olympic selection. This is so important to me, and I'm so excited for this. So I suffered my ass off for the next 10 days or 2 weeks like never before. And probably took off a couple of years of my life, but made it through and made it to the third week and was better then. I was better for the team and still contributing, and then had good form in Rio. But that one sticks out and left a mark.
After that wreck, was the toughest day getting up and getting on the bike the next day, or was it a day later in the tour?
I think the worst was actually when we, the first couple of days after that were terrible in terms of not sleeping, all the inflammation being stuck to everything and bleeding out all my Band-Aids. But when we hit the mountains, the Pyrenees especially, we did the Pyrenees before the Alps that year. They were just horrendous. I was getting dropped and I was being put to the sword in the mountains by these sprinters. And whether we were going uphill or downhill with those sprinters, I was never comfortable. I was always flailing and always squirming. And I just never felt comfortable or confident for a second that I could get through. I was comfortable and confident that I would, go to, basically go to the death to give myself every chance. But that was it. That was a lot of suffering.
What did you tell yourself? How'd you get through it?
Well, I think one of the things I told myself was actually every tour I did, I told my wife, Jamie, I said, don't let me ever do this again. I can never do this again. Don't let me, I said, like, draft up the legal paperwork because I want to be legally accountable to not be able to do this again. This is the last time. It's such a mind game, I think. And that's, if I tell myself, it's one more kilometer, it's one more stage, and it's one more Tour de France. Keep going. And I was really reflecting on, in my career, I was proud to be someone who didn't give up and who was tenacious and did push through. And sometimes I think that was to my detriment, honestly. But in that moment, I allowed that to bolster me, and I hunkered down and saw that as a strength and really leaned heavily on those close around me. My longtime friend and agent, Derek, and Jamie showed up to one of the rest days that year. And I remember seeing them and giving them a hug was really just like an infusion of life and love, and leaned on those around me very heavily.
Amazing. And Brent, I'm really looking forward to seeing your commentary during this tour. So, I guess you've got one more tour ahead of you at least, and hopefully more to come. But thanks so much for taking time to do this today. Really enjoyed this discussion.
Thanks, Andrew. It's been a pleasure, going down memory lane and talking about doing hard things.
I make this podcast free to encourage more people like you to have fun doing hard things. Before you go, please take a moment to rate this show 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Leave a positive review and share this episode with another human who likes doing hard things, because they are the best things and the most fun things in life. Sign up for the newsletter at choosethehardway.com, and you can suggest guests and send me your great ideas at HardwayPod on social and to choosethehardway@gmail.com. Choose the Hard Way is a Big Truck production. Anthony Palmer at Palm Tree Podco is the producer and editor, and Emily Miles is the head of digital and marketing. Jeffrey Nebellini is the world-renowned designer behind our brand identity and the striking Choose the Hard Way logo. The content for this show is created by me, Andrew Vance.